This is the Our York Media Podcast, where we talk with the good news makers of York County, Pennsylvania. I'm your host, Rebecca Hanlon. This week's White Rose Award goes to Mary Yapel. Mary has been the longtime mastermind behind some of York City's most beloved events, from the Old York Street Fair to Light Up Night and more. Mary recently left that role to pursue other opportunities. While Mary says she was just doing her job, many of us know she gave her all to those programs. In fact, I think if we didn't include Mary in our White Rose Award, we might have had a revolt on our hands. There's a lot of love for you in York, Mary. Do you know someone in York who deserves a little recognition? Nominate them for a White Rose. Visit ouryorkmedia.com and you'll find a nomination form under our podcast page. Did you know we profile a different community member each week at ouryorkmedia.com? Whether it comes across your social media feeds or you find our newsletter in your inbox, Neighbors of Our York is about a 2-minute dose of good news to start your Thursday. We're in the middle of a special Neighbors series highlighting those who give time and money to local nonprofits as we gear up for Give Local York on Friday, May 1st. This 24-hour giving spree raised more than $3 million last year and has made it easy for anyone, with any donation amount, to make an impact in their community. Thanks to York Traditions Bank for sponsoring this special Neighbors series. Please visit ouryorkmedia.com to learn why these neighbors are so invested in giving back. Today we're sitting down with Dr. Monea Majeed. She's the Racial Justice Coordinator at the YWCA York. Dr. Monea has also practiced yoga for 17 years and incorporates it into her work. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me, Rebecca.
So, Dr. Monea, tell me, why is York home for you?
York is home for me because I'm raising 3 babies here,
Okay.
and this is home for them. So part of my motivation for getting involved in the York community was them. I wanted to know their environment, and I wanted them to feel like this was home. So I didn't want us to be isolated. Part of making any place home is building community.
Yeah.
And so this is really, it all started from them. And then I've just grown in the process and met friends. And it's definitely home because this is where my heart is and this is where my family is.
How long have you been in the area?
I've lived in York for 3 years,
Okay.
almost exactly. So in December, it was 3 years.
Nice. Where did you come from before that?
So I'm originally from Washington, D.C. We've lived in Northern Virginia. We've lived in the Poconos area right before moving here, and now we're here.
Okay. Very exciting. Well, welcome then.
Thank you.
So I know that yoga is a big part of your life.
Yeah.
How did that come to be?
Yeah, so prior to this interview, I was just kind of thinking, like, which one came first? Was it, like, racial justice or was it yoga? And yoga was a gift that was just given to me to help me along my journey. So I've been doing yoga for 17 years now. Okay. And that's a consistent practice. So I was introduced to yoga 3 years prior. It just didn't stick. But when I was 20, it just stuck for me.
Time was right.
Time was right. And that was when I was really in the thick of facing racism on a deeper level than I'd experienced ever before. Okay. Yeah, I was in college at a predominantly white university in Virginia, and it was, Confederate flags, 1% people of color, and the school has changed a lot since, but at that time they had a lot of growing to do. Okay. And I was kind of witnessing that and experiencing that. Experiencing it for myself, but also wanting to be part of the change. And yoga just gave me that outlet to kind of combine everything. Like, It was the one place we talk about home, but that was home for me, like on my yoga mat. And it also gave me a place to sort out the complexities and the ambiguities of, being directly affected by racism, but wanting the optimism and the hope to be a part of the change. So that was what that was for me.
How did that even influence you early on in confronting some of those things that you were facing then? How did you use that as a tool?
Yeah. So I've always just been interested in activism and racial justice. when I was younger, I didn't call it racial justice because I didn't have that vocabulary, but I was always like literally 4th grade studying the writings of Dr. King. And I grew up in DC. The school was very diverse. So, but it was a diverse school of people of color. So there was African Americans, we had Puerto Ricans, we had Haitians, we had people from West Africa, we had a girl from China. Like, it was very diverse. And so I was always just involved in that. So it was kind of within me to like be the change, so to speak. So when I went away to college, it was just completely different. And it was like seeing the things that I had kind of read about. So at that point, yoga was not my megaphone for peace. It was more like my coping mechanism. Okay. You know what I mean?
Like, it was therapeutic for you.
Yeah. It was an outlet, and it was just to ground me. Because then my message was very radical, full of fear, really. And so I was just going to my mat to be able to show up for this environment. And it wasn't until I began to study yoga philosophy, now as a 500-hour certified teacher, that I began to see the inner workings of yoga and how racial justice is embedded in that. So that relationship is new in my world. Okay. Because of my study. Yeah. But when I was just a student, and I'm always a student of yoga, but when I was just practicing as a student, I hadn't made those connections. I just knew that it was helping me. But now, because I understand yoga philosophy deeper, I understand that there is an inherent relationship. Yeah.
How did you carry that with you in your career?
Yeah. So right now, the way I use my yoga philosophy and the study of that is overall mindfulness. And just starting, when I have a racial justice training, a lot of it is about awareness. We kind of start with talking about implicit bias. Oftentimes we're unaware of that. But yoga and mindfulness, the first thing is just about awareness. Focus on your breath. You know what I mean? And so if we can deepen this focus on something as simple as our breath that's always there, just imagine all the other things that we can be awakened to or alivened to. And so I always start my trainings with some type of mindfulness, like tapping into the breath. I believe that racial justice work is internal as well as external. Obviously we have to confront racism and systemic racism, but some of that, we have to start within. Yeah. Because I believe that people make the systems, the policies, and the procedures. And so I'm always coming at it from that place of mindfulness and awareness, and also from this idea that yoga talks about is yoga means union. So it means that we are one, right? So whenever there's a separation between us, we've created that. But that is something that we created, but we can also rebuild and take away. Yeah. So that's what that's always my mindset. So I'm always about having conversations, doing some deep inner work. I just started calling it like the 3 R's of racial justice work for me. Reflection, resilience, and relationships. Okay. Yeah.
Your position at the YWCA is a fairly new one.
Yeah,
right?
It's brand
It didn't
new.
exist before you.
No.
Okay. Was that a career path that you saw for yourself? Like when you were in college, were you studying something related to that? Or
Yeah.
how did you end up following that's where you are now?
It's so funny that you asked that, Rebecca, because I've always been planting seeds in my life for this position. I just didn't know that this position existed or that I would be here, but I'm well studied and trained. So when I was an undergrad, my major was sociology. Okay. And I actually double majored in politics because I thought politics was my journey until I was on Capitol Hill. And then I had all of these credits for political science, so I didn't want to get rid of them. So I just added the double major of sociology. But even then, I was studying social inequality, and I was studying gender. So my independent study in college was about Black feminism. Okay. And so I was studying intersectionality. So that's just always been a part of my world. So when I went home to Howard, And that's where I got my master's and my PhD. And Howard is just like the mecca for social inequality, urban sociology. A lot of the sociologists who did groundbreaking work in my field went to Howard, like Fraser's on the Wall. And, so that, so I studied social inequality. And then it was due to race, gender, and ethnicity, and also urban sociology. I worked then at the Census Bureau, so I have been doing data crunching on poverty and health insurance, and so I saw it from a statistical lens, which I still bring to my work today.
Sure.
So I was always on that journey, I just didn't know exactly how it would come together, especially with the yoga. So when I interviewed at the YW and I heard that they had like a mindfulness new initiative going on, I was like, it just, you know what I mean? It just like my world was kind of coming together in ways that I hadn't predicted. And it did all start with my children because I wanted to get involved in the community. And so I was like, well, if I work at the YW and I started meeting people, then maybe I'll get more involved in the community. And that's, so when I saw that position, I just already had the tools to just kind of like walk right into it and kind of claim it.
It checked off a lot of boxes for you.
Yeah, definitely.
In what ways do you find yourself incorporating the yoga practice today, like specifically in New York with the work that you do for racial justice? Can you explain a little bit how you intertwine those things? Because they're both so personal and meaningful to you.
Yeah. So the one thing that we do that is kind of like glaring the combination of the two is Yoga for Justice. And that was just a class that, it was like maybe my first month on the job, and we went on a retreat and they asked me to like lead a workshop. And so I just did this thing where I taught a yoga class and I incorporated the teachings of Dr. King, and I tied it to yoga philosophy. There's this, it's called Satya, which is truth. And so I just combine that with Dr. King's message on truth. And we came back to York, and someone's like, oh, that was Yoga for Justice. Let's offer that. So I've offered that a few times, and I think I'm offering it again in May.
Okay.
I've also offered it right before Race Against Racism last year. And then also when I do my trainings, I always start with some type of mindfulness. Whenever given the opportunity, like I was asked to speak at an MLK celebration, and I did a visualization where I kind of walked through like seeing things through the lens of Dr. King, like some of the dark side, like how he would look at that, and then bringing people to visualize the beloved community that Dr. King talks about. So those are the glaring things. The more subtle individual work is me doing yoga, practicing yoga in all of my affairs, because oftentimes people think about yoga as yoga asana, which is those are the poses, but yoga has 8 limbs, so it's about meditation also. It's about going within, doing your inner work, pratyahara. So it's a lot bigger than just sitting on a mat. It's about authentic communication and relationships. And so that is, it's all over what I do. And I notice, like, if I don't spend enough time practicing yoga and yoga philosophy, like, I'm not I can't show up in an authentic way for my work. So it's almost like I have to do this. Like, I literally have to wake up every single morning and start with my centering meditation, which I teach people, because for me, it's just going to like bring me back to center, where I'm thinking about, my purpose and being of service. So it's always combined for me individually, and as often as possible, I share that. Yeah.
That's really fascinating. So, all this work that you do, how do you hope that impacts York?
Wow. So what I really hope is, I think my hope for York changes as the work grows. So when I first came, I was just like, okay, let's back this up. It's more about education and speaking a shared common language about race and racism. And I still believe that is part of what I bring. Because I am a teacher. I love to train. I'm a professor. So I love teaching. And also my biggest service is having conversations about race. I often feel like it's like talking about puberty with your parents or something. Like nobody wants to talk about it.
Awkward but necessary.
Yeah. So I'm like, if we could just talk about it. So the YW, years ago, they had these things called courageous conversations. And as soon as I heard it, I was like, that's what I want to do. So I've just been calling them courageous conversations to gather people to talk about race and racism in very informal environments. So we did it last spring at, it's called On the Table.
Okay.
And that was at Rockfish Grill. We did one at the York Art Association, and we did one at Goodridge, and we're getting ready to do another one at the end of this month at Belmont Bean Co.
Okay.
Just over some coffee, talking about anti-racism. So really what I want to do is just provide a platform to talk where we can let our defenses down and all be vulnerable, because this is the thing, like nobody gets to do this work perfectly. It's messy, it's risky, because you have to have that courage. And I just remember when I first said, I want to do courageous conversations, and some people said, well, we don't feel that courageous. And I was like, well, that's
when you need it.
Yeah, and that's what we have to do, because it's a muscle. Like if you go to the gym and you lift and you get stronger. The same thing with this. The first time you talk about race with people, it might feel awkward, but then the more you do it, the more it becomes like, oh, okay, yeah, we can talk about this, and I'm not gonna offend, because I find that people of color are sensitive. They don't want to talk about it, fear being hurt. But then white people are also fearful. So we're all in the same fear type of mindset, but we don't know it yet until we sit down and talk and realize how we can grow from fear to love.
Yeah. I think it's fascinating stuff, and you're having very vulnerable conversations with people on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. What's kind of a tip we can leave people with? How can I become more aware of the biases that I have and then do something about it?
Right. So sometimes like the easiest way to confront your own bias is like the Harvard implicit bias test. I know it's kind of, but it's on their website and you can take it. Other times it's more like back to that awareness of like noticing what comes up for you. Like for example, and this one isn't even about race, but one of my friends said that he noticed that he had a problem with women leadership, that he would always kind of cringe if like a woman was in leadership. So he kind of leaned into that, and he hired like a female accountant, a female barber, like, every way that he could grow and lean into this, so that he could change, but I think that first step is awareness. And what I see in York, I think a big tip would be to go to an event where maybe you are a minority, or maybe, because there's so much that goes on in York. Like my calendar is full of cultural events. And then I have some people in York, they say, well, we don't know what to do, how to meet like people of color. And I'm like, look at all these events, So it would just be a matter of like showing up for the event and kind of witnessing like what is coming up for you.
Yeah.
That inner work.
Yeah. Well, thank you for what you do. Very hard conversations that you have, but I think really important ones for us to take on and have as a community. So thank you for that. I really appreciate you coming on and talking to us a little bit about what you do. It's very fascinating work, and I think it's really important for York.
Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca.
Before we end, have we mentioned how grateful we are that you're spending time with us? Each time you listen, download, or even better, subscribe to our podcast, you're helping support us in our mission to give York something better to talk about. For more information on Our York Media and our Good News Initiative, you can visit ouryorkmedia.com. The Our York Media podcast is produced by Will Hanlon and Ken Brueggemann. I'm Rebecca Hanlon. Thanks so much for listening.